We begin once again here in Nigeria, where President Tinubu has declared a nationwide state of emergency after a sharp rise in mass kidnappings and deadly militant attacks. Recent weeks have seen a series of high-profile abductions. In one case, a Catholic school in Niger State said more than 300 pupils were taken. President Tinubu said the jihadi groups Boko Haram and Islamic State of West Africa Province, or ISWAP, are behind the abductions. It's the first official identification of the gunmen engaged in the deadly attacks. The presidency said that the long stretches of Nigeria's forests bordering Benin, Niger, and Cameroon are being exploited by militants, bandits, and criminal gangs to hide and infiltrate rural communities. Mr. Tinubu reiterated his promise to rescue all those who've been kidnapped, including the Catholic school children who were taken in Niger State. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the top security analyst and head of Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, Kabiru Adamu. Thank you very much indeed for coming in, Kabiru.
My pleasure, Charles.
So President Tinubu declares a nationwide security emergency. What does it actually mean to declare a nationwide security emergency?
The declaration of an emergency is contained in Section 305 of the Constitution. And it gave the circumstances under which an emergency can be declared. If the nation is at war, if a part of the nation is under public threat, the public order has degenerated to a point where the only option is to declare that state of emergency. And I think a lot of those circumstances we're already experiencing them in Nigeria. So to that extent, I think the usage of Section 305 by the President is fine. The only worry is in the statement where the President announced that declaration. It doesn't seem to me like the steps that have been mentioned are steps associated with an emergency. A lot of them would require probably more than a year, 6 months in the minimum to implement.
Like the hirings and things.
Exactly,
yeah.
Or the issue around open grazing, or the forest guards. By my estimation, the DSS have only trained probably about 1,000 plus, maximum maybe 2,000 of such forest guards. So given the magnitude of the challenge, one would think that the measures would be measures that would be felt in a very short time. And maybe there could be mid-term and long-term measures. So that's one of the concerns I kind of have with that statement or the declaration. The second part is Section 305, subsection 3 of the Constitution, which requires that the National Assembly must endorse this declaration. Although the same section recognizes that there could be instances where the National Assembly, for one reason or the other, cannot sit, and so the President was allowed. But even there, a period was given upon which the National Assembly should endorse that declaration. In this instance, we've not been told for how long this emergency state would last. So it's a bit unclear, and it kind of raises the concern whether this is another political kind of state action or statement without the real grit necessary and required to address the security challenge. Perhaps in the course of the conversation we can look at other aspects.
Sure.
But at this stage, it doesn't seem to me that we're in a state of emergency.
Right. Well, I mean, the presumption is, and I think the points you're making are quite valid, but I would imagine that the presumption is that it will be spelt out in the days to come. I mean, the nitty-gritty of it, because he's made a fairly bold, large statement at the moment, which, as you correctly pointed out, is more for political and public consumption. But the nitty-gritty of it may well take a bit of time. I mean, I'm just sort of presuming that. I don't know.
This is the challenge, Charles. If we're left to presume, then it does not speak to the emergency.
No, but my assumption is that, because what we understand is that the implementation period begins from today, and the presumption must be that there will be further interpretations of that statement by the sections of the government that are directly concerned. I mean, that includes the army, the police, the state security services, and all the rest of them. But let me ask you this, because kidnappings and militant attacks are not new. I mean, in the last couple of years, we've had lots of kidnappings, lots of people being taken into the bush, ransoms demanded, bandits regularly attacking people across northern Nigeria and beyond. What do you think has prompted President Tinubu to take this unprecedented action, declaring a state security emergency now?
Let me start by giving you a picture of where we are in terms of the rate of abductions in Nigeria as at November 2025. We've recorded over 7,000 abductions in the country.
You mean so far this year?
So far this year.
That is alarming.
It is alarming. And if you look at the figure for last year, which the entire period for last year, we recorded about 6,000. So clearly, the level is, the rate is increasing. We're in November. Probably by December, it would reach maybe 8,000. I'm not sure of that. So clearly, it's increasing. So that could be one of the reasons why, which prompted the president to do this. But then the most, let me be presumptuous like you too, to associate it with the statement by President Trump. Of course, President Trump came out to speak about the Christian genocide. He threatened military intervention on Nigeria. And we've seen a lot of action by the government after that. So maybe, again, this is a reaction to that threat, as it were, by the United States. As you're aware...
And does that raise the question that does that raise issues for you that this is more of a sort of, political statements to try and show the world that we're kind of girding our loins as far as this problem is concerned?
The world will not be deceived by that, and that is what worries me. We would love to see a clear pathway with strategies spelled out on how to address the security challenge. We've got enough muscle within the national security enterprise. There are 42 organizations, Charles. Each of them has a mandate to fulfill within that national security enterprise. And just to be clear what I mean by national security enterprise, these are the MDAs, like I said, 42 of them. Just to give you a picture, the military ones, about 4 of them, the intelligence ones, also about 4, the paramilitary ones, so many of them, 42 of them. 29 primary and then another 14 associated, such as the Nigeria Financial Intelligence Unit, the EFCC. All those ones are associated. I didn't include them in the primary one. So what would be beautiful for us to see as part of the national security enterprise is a reignitement of the mandate of each of us. Border protection, as an example. I'm sure you've hosted guests who have mentioned to you that the porosity of our borders is a challenge. What are we going to do about that? Will this recruitment of 20,000 additional policemen address that? The informal economy through which the movement of both ransom money, the money that terrorists use for funding, with the recruitment of 20,000 policemen or the other issues? So that's number one within the national security enterprise. Number two are the instruments. The policies, the strategies, the laws that we have for addressing insecurities. We've got so many of them that are not being implemented. Let me give you the example of the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act as amended 2022. That act defines what terrorism in Nigeria. It has a sanctions list. In the minimum, as a corporate organization, if you're going to give out a contract, it is expected that you look at that sanctions list and make sure you're not giving out that contract to a sponsor of terrorism. How many companies in Nigeria do that? So our instruments would need to be also made effective.
Yes.
At the moment they are not. And then the last part are the partnerships that we have, our relationship with the US, our relationship with Russia, with Niger, name them. All of those partnerships, internally too, the kind of partnerships we have to strengthen national security. So this is what the national security enterprise is. And this is what I would have hoped we would look at to see what are the gaps. Why are we not operating that national security enterprise to make our security imperatives.
Right. Well, as I said,
this is what the world will be looking at. It's not about this makeshift arrangements that we're making. If we think we're going to convince the world by declaring a state of emergency, I think we better stop kidding ourselves. The world is waiting for concrete actions, and those concrete actions is what would reduce the fatality from the level they are today to an acceptable level.
That's a very illuminating analysis, and I cannot obviously speak for the government, but the assumption is that there are people who are as knowledgeable as you are within the security architecture of this country who will be taking those things into consideration. And the hope also is that they will be consulting people like you, because you're obviously a very knowledgeable person in that area. But to use that word presumption again, the presumption is that security is going to be beefed up in Nigeria, particularly in those ungoverned spaces that have given these gunmen cover for their operations. But I mean, you talked about the many different sort of security agencies. There are also lots of different armed groups that are responsible for these kidnappings and deadly attacks across Nigeria. How challenging will it be bringing them to heel?
Extremely challenging. The insecurity rate has been left to fester. If it was nipped at the early stages, it would have been easier. But now it's been left to fester. And echo space has created that is feeding the many challenges. At my level, a private company, we attempted to map the threat actors. And Charles, we came up with 80 different threat actors.
My goodness.
The terrorist groups, about 6-7 of them. The ideological 1-7, if you add IPOB. And then, of course, the different ramifications of IPOB, about 8 of them. And then, of course, the bandit groups, the cult groups, about 80 of them spreading across the country. But those that are engaged in mass abduction are only 2. The ideological ones and then the bandit groups. They are the ones that involve in mass abduction. They are the ones who hibernate in forests, then continue what they're doing. Whenever they are ready, they come out, they engage in their activities. So it's not going to be easy to address them. Like I said, an echo space has already emerged. The war is asymmetric, and so the method too would have to be smart. It would not be a conventional method. But then I believe that as a country we have enough firepower, we have enough muscle to address it. What we need is a cohesive action involving the 3 C's: collaboration, coordination, and cooperation within that national security enterprise. As an example, I would hope that the president would request from the coordinators of the national security architecture, the national security advisor, the ministers of defense, police affairs, interior, he would request from them a blueprint for addressing this security challenge. The first thing they should do is to map these threat actors. I mean, and it's not going to be difficult. Just have an interactive map. Spot them on that interactive map, try to understand what their motivations are, how they feed into the various challenges that we have.
But you would have thought they would have been doing that. I mean, this has been going on for over a decade.
So this is the challenge, why I said the declaration of emergency is not what we need. This is what we need. We need this type of clear roadmap to address the issues, understanding the locations of the threat actors, understanding their motivations, understanding their modus operandi, and more importantly, Charles, who are those sponsoring them? So doing that...
Yes, I was going to come to that in a minute, but let me ask you this first. Because, we talked at the outset about what it means for a state of emergency on security to be imposed. I mean, what is it going to mean for ordinary Nigerians? Does that mean that life is going to become more uncomfortable with a lot more checkpoints, the government imposing stricter measures, increased patrols, and potential disruptions to daily activities?
So assuming that the spirit and content of the Constitution is encapsulated under subsection 305, and what in conventional terms a state of emergency is understood to mean. What we would expect from a public point of view would be additional deployment, additional powers to the security agencies. So in some instances, they wouldn't need court warrants, for instance,
right.
to
pick up people
locations,
or whatever.
to pick up people.
Right.
Some of the requirements of the Constitution, for instance, keeping people for a certain period of time, maybe put aside, if at all we're in a state of emergency. So again, let me be presumptuous and assume that maybe this would follow, but for now we're not seeing anything to that effect.
Right, and you talked about this strategy having to make sure that it's got the people who finance these activities in their sights. Is that something that will be difficult? I mean, that what I'm assuming from what you're saying is that there cannot be any sacred cows.
There cannot be. If the world is going to take us seriously, and I say this with all sense of responsibility, I belong to an association of international security practitioners that has membership in 158 countries, and it's the highest level of security certification, and I've been a leader in that association. In the last 10 days, I'm being asked question, Charles, where are our security agencies? People from Colombia, from Iraq, from countries that have faced even deeper security challenges than what we're facing, are asking me this critical question: where are our security agencies? And I'm at that point where I'm asking myself the question: where are they? It's unfathomable to think that 300 students can be taken from a school and then they are being kept up till today.
And that nobody seems to. Well, I was going to ask you that actually, because I mean, you're very good with your investigations, and you've got a very, if I might call it, sonic ear to the ground.
Thank you,
with regard to insecurity in this country. I mean, what have you found with regard to who's behind those attacks?
So
the president said it was Boko Haram and ISWAP.
In the case of the Niger incident, it was bandit groups.
Right.
The same bandit groups that we...
But there's been no ransom demand, there's been no... Well, at least it hasn't been made public.
To the extent of what I can see publicly,
right.
There was an engagement team, and the engagement team was able to identify who was behind, and then they used non-kinetic measures, including persuasion. So
just the one in Kebbi State?
In Kebbi State. Right. Just to give you a scenario, they were able to identify the mother of the bandit commander, and then they now intervened.
So they put him on a guilt trip,
well, more than a guilt trip.
Right.
Like I said, there was
a bit of pressure.
Cultural pressures that they used. And that's the part that I know. Whether there was something else beyond that, right. I don't know.
But you haven't heard anything about the Niger State one?
Because it's an ongoing case, I want to be careful what I say. But at this stage, all I would say is that it's a different group.
Right.
That was behind.
An ideological group?
Yes, an ideological group, but I wouldn't want to say, again, it's an ongoing case, and I wouldn't want to jeopardize.
Okay. And I mean, we've seen very robust debate from lawmakers in the National Assembly talking about making kidnapping an offense of terrorism. President Tinubu calling on them to allow states that require state police to create them. So a lot of gathering momentum over this issue. Does that give you much encouragement that security, even though the fine points that you talked about don't appear to have been highlighted yet, but at least that it's finally getting the attention it deserves?
It's getting attention, but I'm worried that the attention may be mirrored in inaction. From the time President Trump did what he did on Truth Social to now, if at all we're serious, we should have been able to put together. How long did it take the Department of War to come up with a war plan for him? It took them just 2-3 days. In our own case, we still don't have something like a roadmap.
And yet we're the ones who are living with it.
With the challenge. So this is my worry. Back to the National Assembly. The legislative instruments at their disposal for, as it were, putting pressure on the executive arm of government, they are not using it. And I'll quickly go through the legislative instruments. Number one is legislation itself. the laws that they are allowed to make as the parliament. Number 2 is the oversight function. And then number 3 is the budgeting process. Now, in each of these legislative instruments, there are ways they can put pressure. The worst, as far as I'm concerned, is the oversight function. Oversight function in Nigeria is not effective. And I'm hoping that this 10th Assembly would make history by making oversight effective. One of the easiest ways to do that is to ensure that when their members visit the various MDAs, that they don't depend on them to buy their tickets. They don't depend on them for their accommodation.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not going to talk about the other aspects of corruption, but these very obvious ones need to end. And there are instruments for oversight. If you do not have knowledge, technical knowledge of the organization or the ministry that you are oversighting, the result is not going to be effective.
Indeed.
So number 2 is to make sure they've got around them people who understand those industries, who understand the sector. Every year, at the every legislative period, at the beginning of the assembly, they come up with what they call legislative agenda, and you see kind of the same things being repeated. Security always features, Charles. But then, what are the specific aspects of security that will be measured when they are doing their oversight? I'm very happy that the Senate has kind of collapsed its committees on 2 or 3 committees. So we're hoping that that's what they intend to do in terms of strengthening the capacity of those committees, not only in terms of their membership, but making sure the clerks and the other staffers that support those committees are experts who can actually support them. At this stage in our national existence, I think we need to be truthful to ourselves. We can't continue doing the same thing and expecting a different result, Charles. Everything they've discussed in the parliament, everything the president has mentioned are the same things that we were doing before. We need to do it differently.
Indeed.
And I've kind of mentioned a few areas that I'm hoping to see in the coming days that we're doing it differently.
And just before we let you go, I mean, as I said, this has been most enlightening. Of course, this declaration of emergency highlights the need, doesn't it, to address underlying issues such as poverty, unemployment, corruption, which all contribute to insecurity.
It does, but this is a challenge. The federal government alone cannot do that, Charles. I know in the past, at the level of the Federal Economic Council, discussions around the involvement of the governors have been, held. This is the time to make sure that we actually achieve that. The governors are getting huge sums of money as a result of the changes that this administration has brought in. But we need to see those monies being utilized in a manner that reduces poverty. Our unemployment rate, in spite of the calculations that was done that brought it down, in reality the unemployment rate is still extremely high, especially among the youths. And for as long as that remains, the pool from which the bad guys recruit will continue to remain. So what I'm recommending, I've said it before and I'll repeat it again, we need an expanded National Security Council meeting. What do I mean by expanded? The membership of the Security Council is stated clearly in the Constitution, but then the President there's a clause there that allows the President to invite whoever he feels to be part of that council. So my recommendation, invite the leadership of the National Assembly, the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of Rep, invite the 6, at least governors from the 6 geopolitical zones, including the chairman of the Governors Forum, and then invite other key individuals. I mean, there's nothing wrong with inviting some private individuals. Dangote, as an example, the role he's playing in supporting this economy should be recognized, and a few others. What that would do is that they would sit in that meeting, look each other in the eye, and for whatever they say to each other, but come out of that meeting with a clear strategy for addressing the drivers and triggers of insecurity within the country. We're not going to move anywhere if we don't address those triggers.
Indeed.
Those triggers.
It's been great talking with you, Kabiru. Really very good. Kabiru Adamu is a top security analyst. You can see why. And he's also the head of Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me, Charles.